So it's Friday, which means it's the start of my Magician's Nephew read-along for this weekend. It is actually Friday morning. I thought I was working today. Turns out I'm not. So I'm going to be reading the first 4 chapters early today so I can crack on with some other things this afternoon. But yeah, I've got my coffee. I'm still in my pajamas because I'm doing a lazy day today. And then, yeah, let's start reading The Magician's Nephew. Anyone who hasn't read or heard of Narnia, Magician's Nephew is the prequel book. Chronologically, it's the first book in the series. So as a child, I got given this box set, this exact box set, which has them numbered 1 to 7. This is my number 1. It's always been my number 1. I know a lot of people say you should read it in publish order, so you should read Lion, Witch and the Wardrobe first. I have never read it that order, so I'm gonna continue reading it Magician's Nephew first. That's why I'm reading it first. If you want to do it differently, that's fine, whatever. But this is the way I'm reading it for this read along, and I'm starting with Polly and Diggory and their story. Yeah, let's read. So the first 4 chapters I have now read. As expected, it's such a small book that it's quite an easy read. So if you are reading this in the evening, absolutely could probably get through more than 4 chapters. I feel like it's bringing back a lot of nostalgia for me as I read them when I was very young. I don't know if I even have, no. I don't know when I got the exactly, but I was a child. But yeah, I think chapter 1 was like the perfect introduction to Polly and Diggory. I found kind of that first meeting of them to be really well written in a way to like explain Diggory's backstory. A really good introduction to Polly that, like, you know, she's not gonna take any shit really. She's gonna speak her mind, but also like she can admit when she's wrong, and she, you know, her and Diggory become fast friends because of it. I also really liked kind of Diggory's backstory, him having to move to London with his sick mother to live with his family. And again, this is kind of thinking ahead because I've already read all the books before, but I kind of find it really reminiscent to the Pevensey kids having to move to the country away from their mother because of the war, and kind of this start of a book being, okay, so the kids are put into a place that's unfamiliar, they go exploring, they find something bigger than what they think they're going to find. And then I find that Polly's obviously in her own home, but she's been exploring kind of the rafters in the attic, and that kind of curiosity where, you know, she's found it and she's kind of made a little cave with wonders in it, but also until Diggory came around, she wasn't quite curious enough to go exploring further. And I just really enjoyed that, like, their friendship was cemented so early on in this first chapter. Chapter 2 was also completely different. One of the things I've got is like the mention of Mrs. Le Fay, which is Uncle Andrew's godmother. That, and also the mention of like Atlantis, Atlantean artifacts, things being given to Uncle Andrew, being from a civilization that was there at the dawn of time, and how C.S. Lewis has really brought together different tales that kids will know, because this was a kid's book, but kids will know these tales and they'll be able to connect to those things, like Le Fay being kind of a witch or a fairy or a fae, and then obviously Atlantis being the lost city. I also found in chapter 2 one of the lines from Uncle Andrew was, "Men like me who possess hidden wisdom, freed from common rules just as we are cut off from common pleasures." And as Diggory said right afterwards, this is just him kind of saying like he can do whatever he wants to get whatever he wants. And that really cements the character really early on in the book, so we know immediately like Uncle Andrew is the villain completely. And then we also, chapter 4, like the first 4 chapters have so much in it, because then we're immediately into the wood between worlds, and I always loved this premise of having like a place to go and then you go to different worlds afterwards, and it's like a great portal fantasy aspect. And my biggest thing about that was like, it's so memorable, is the guinea pig. I would love to have been that guinea pig. Like, you get bought for experiments and then you have a whole wood to yourself. I just think it's so cute, like the little picture in it. I don't know, let's see if I can show you it on camera. So on chapter. So this is the little illustration that came with my book, and I love the thought of these guinea pigs, because there was multiple guinea pigs, remember, like he tried it a few different times, and these guinea pigs are just kind of going about their life. They're going to create like a little kingdom in the wood between worlds, and I just found that great. Another thing on the wood between worlds is actually like, whilst Uncle Andrew doesn't have any idea what's going on or how it works, really, he just knows you go somewhere. The wood between worlds actually gives you kind of slight amnesia when you first start there. Both Polly and Diggory are like, I've always been here, like where else would I have been from? And I love this kind of fact because I feel like I didn't really notice it when I was a kid, but that means if it hadn't been both of them going, they would have had no reason to like remember anything else. So if Polly had gone there on her own and Diggory hadn't gone after her, even if she had the separate ring, she may never have remembered that, you know, she had somewhere else to go back from. But as soon as Diggory turns up, he sees the ring of the guinea pig, he remembers about Uncle Andrew and the rings and home, and they start to both remember and like remind each other of this. And I just found it really interesting because it's like most of the stories there's always like at least a duo of people. We kind of see it in The Lion, Witch and the Wardrobe as they get older in Narnia, the Pevensey children, they forget about their home world. And yeah, it just means like if you're just swapping between realms, at what point do you fully forget or fully remember the other worlds you've been in? It's just a really interesting point. But yeah. And then of course we do reach the kind of dead world that's kind of very dark, filled with black sky, well, bluey black skies, quite ominous. Everything's a bit red, and then we see these like waxwork figures or statues of all these people who are getting like crueler and meaner as they go down the line until we reach the last woman. I found it really interesting how they were described. I find it really funny that like we got through all the people and then we're told, oh, these people are much taller, they're much bigger than humans. Because I feel like when we first go in and they're very friendly faces, we don't really see how otherworldly they are. And then as it gets further on into the chapter, we get a bit more of a kind of a horror feeling, like uncanny valley, something's a bit wrong. And then also the magic starts seeping into Diggory. Like he mentions that he feels it as he goes in. Polly doesn't seem to have as much of an effect, but Diggory, especially like by the end of it, starts becoming more and more angry, more and more like his Uncle Andrew, like he deserves anything that he wants, he gets his way. And I find it really intriguing that we see that slow shift as Diggory is in that hall more and more, and gets even worse as he sees like the hammer and the bell. And then obviously there's also the question of like, is it just that place? Is it the hall? Is it the hammer and bell? Is it someone? I don't think it's ever actually fully explained. I'll see it probably tomorrow if it is. But I just found it really interesting that Diggory was so affected, especially as obviously I'm rereading it so I know the rest of the book, how we know Uncle Andrew is also heavily affected by the magic as well. And women, Polly, don't seem to be as affected as men. So it's Saturday. I've done some household chores today, but now I'm back in bed and I am ready to read chapters 5 to 10 of The Magician's Nephew. I think this is going to be the bulk of like the action of the book. I cannot remember it from when I was younger, but I'm quite excited to get back into it. This is like the perfect weekend to be reading something so nostalgic as well. It's meant to snow this evening where I live. I'm hoping it does because I love snow. But yeah, and basically I'm setting myself up in bed with my blankets, with some coffee, with a book. And when I finish my chapters of this, I have another book over there as well. And my Kindle, as you can see. So yeah, I'm really excited. Okay, so chapters 5 to 10 are done, and as I thought, a lot of the biggest details come in these chapters. I actually can't believe there's 4 more chapters because I can't remember much happening after Narnia is created, which is really funny. But here's my thoughts on the chapters I've just read. So first up is the chapters kind of start with going back to London, and I really enjoyed Uncle Andrew and Jadis meeting because Lewis actively says this is how they are similar. There's something about their face that like marks them as a magician, and it really hones in on that similarity, but then it also goes, but they're so different, and you know, he's a bit of a feeble old man, he's a bit of a coward, and there's lots of things there. But this is really kind of an add-on to when we first kind of meet Jadis, because the witch has a lot of like assumptions and a lot of ego. So she assumes that a great magician must have sent these people to come and collect her because he's in love with her or he's like a great king, and she's wrong on all accounts. But like Uncle Andrew did the exact same thing. He sent them to this world with loads of assumptions that he didn't know anything about, he just assumed. And he also had that ego of, I can do whatever I like, doesn't matter because I'm me. And the witch has the same thoughts as that because she's a queen. She believes that all of the people under her are hers to own and decide their fate. And like those similarities are just really driven home in the first kind of middle chapters that I read. Another thing that I found really interesting was that Jadis becomes weaker in the wood, and this is kind of a ongoing thing throughout, and Uncle Andrew also seems to become weaker in the wood, which is really interesting. And I don't know if it's maybe like there isn't magic in the woods to sustain them properly, or if it's something else, and like maybe the kids in the cabbie and the horse have something else going on that makes them not affected. I don't know, but I just thought that was a really interesting thing to look at. But Uncle Andrew as a whole just becomes more of a bumbling fool, less of a villain, I think. I think if you didn't know it was his own fault, you'd probably feel a bit sorry for him, as he's referred to as slave, and he's, you know, ordered to do things that he doesn't really want to do, and he has to goes and drinks 2 glasses of wine, puts on his best outfit, and then has to beg his sister for money because he actually can't afford to entertain Jadis. And then Jadis kind of like takes advantage of him on many occasions, despite Andrew thinking he is better than he is. And I just really enjoyed the relationship between them because she obviously didn't think they were equal, and he doesn't either. He definitely knows he is below her, but he definitely thinks he is higher than maybe she does. And I think that kind of knocks him down a peg, and I think Jadis probably also needs to be knocked down a peg, but we'll see if that actually happens in the final chapters. I also wanted to quickly talk about Diggory's family. So Aunt Letty is a mad woman because she literally gets thrown across her own home. Thankfully only gets some bruises, but her first thought after this is to just have lunch with Diggory. She sends like one of the maids to the police station, but she doesn't really do anything else after she is literally thrown across her room and her brother leaves with the person who does it. Like, she's a tough woman, but she's slightly insane for that. We then get into kind of, we never see what Jadis' crimes are, we just hear about them for all the civilians that kind of followed them home with Uncle Andrew. And I found that really fun. Like, we didn't have loads of time with them, but we kind of heard them one after another. She's a thief, she attacked a policeman, she did all these things, and Andrew repeats it in one of the later chapters as well. But I instantly liked the cabbie, and I instantly liked Strawberry the horse. Obviously, Strawberry the horse is a character that becomes more important in the next chapter, but I loved that, you know, he was born from kind of show horses and was really important, and then he goes to Narnia, he becomes a talking horse, and I just adored his little storyline of him being an important figure. And then of course there's in these chapters, Narnia is also created. So it's created, it's been given life, it's been given animals, and then it's been given talking animals. And I really enjoyed the way it was set up as creation. It had the kind of nothingness vibe, but then it also had the music and the lights. And I'm actually really excited to see how they will do this in the adaptation, because I feel like whoever's doing the score is going to have like a real tough time of like making sure they get kind of creating life, creating animals, and then going into kind of the talking of Aslan and the talking animals as well. Should be really interesting. And then of course we have Uncle Andrew, who only thinks of himself even these things. Him and Jadis kind of don't like the sound of the music being happening. They don't like the lion, they don't like Aslan, and they're both quite scared and cowardly in a way. Jadis throws the lamppost at Aslan's face, and that becomes the lamppost that we see the Pevensies see. However, she then just runs away, and the same with Uncle Andrew. He's just very cowardly. He makes himself stupid and unable to understand the animals and Aslan, but then he's like running away and he's trying to avoid the animals who are just trying to see who he is. Although I do find it funny that Aslan says there's an evil already in this world and then doesn't really back that up with any information, especially since Uncle Andrew's right there and they ask if he is the evil, when actually it's probably more of the witch that's ran away. And yeah, the kids themselves are really brave. I really enjoyed the cabbie's character, who's just really calm, cool-headed. I find it really funny that like London cabbies, even back then, saw so much shit on a daily basis, that going to two new worlds and seeing a world being created is so like mundane enough for them to not be like, what is going on? They're just like, just watch, just listen, it's fine. And that just really says everything about cabbies in London. But I loved his talk with Strawberry, his horse, and about how they like lived together beforehand. And the kids themselves, like I'm really interested to see Diggory go to speak to Aslan for his mother. Uncle Andrew not caring about his own sister was a really odd one. I think you'd think he'd care a little bit since she lives in the house with them, but maybe that was Aunt Lettie's doing. But yeah, his whole character arc was kind of, he would cut off his nose to spite his face kind of vibe. He's a bit of a coward, doesn't want to do anything because he's too old to do it, and he'd rather have a younger person do it for him. Yeah, it was all very interesting. We'll see how it goes tomorrow. Okay, so it's Sunday. It's a miserable day. I was promised snow, and I swear to God, it snowed in the night, and by the time I'd even woken up, most of it had already melted because it started raining immediately after, and it's not stopped since. So it's really grey and gloomy, so of course I have put myself back into bed, and I'm going to be reading the final chapters of The Magician's Nephew. I have been enjoying it so far, really nostalgic. I'm at the part of the book which I actually can't remember much of. Like, I remembered the Wood Between Worlds, kind of going to London and the creation of Narnia. And this last bit, things have been coming back to me since yesterday. I'm like, oh yeah, no, that thing did happen. But I feel like when I was younger, maybe I zoned out a bit by the end of the book. I don't know. I didn't really remember much happening after the creation of Narnia, but that's what all these chapters are. So we're gonna find out. Okay, so I finished the final chapters of The Magician's Nephew. I really enjoyed it. I thought there was going to be a bit more than there was, but there was a few blank pages at the end, so I had to read less than I thought I was going to. But I found that, like, as I got further to the end, it was kind of packing things up, so there wasn't a lot going on, but they were just kind of tying up into a little bow ready for the rest of the books, as this is classed as a prequel book to Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe. But some of my favourite moments from these last chapters was the elephant and the bulldog having a little bit of beef. They had a measuring contest about their nose and like what's more important, and yeah, I just really found that quite funny. The cabbie and the wife, Helen, becoming the first king and queen of Narnia is obviously something I do remember from when I was a kid, but like, what happens to them and their kids and their line? I feel like that wasn't explained in the rest of the books. It might be. I'm going to read the rest this year. Maybe I just forgot about it, but I thought that was quite interesting. And also the tree. I don't remember anything about the tree in any of the other books, so I don't know if I'm just being really forgetful or were all these things explained in the other books and I forgot. I don't know. But one of the things I did really like actually was Diggory had, I guess, like a second arc in this part of the book. He kind of had to openly and honestly say like, oh yeah, no, I woke the witch, I brought her here, it's my fault. I wasn't enchanted by the bell, I was just kind of thinking I was, and I was kind of using that as a way to get my way. And I found that really interesting because it really like shows that he could have been like Uncle Andrew as he grew up, but because of this growth arc that he's gone on in like Narnia, he's probably much better than Uncle Andrew because of this. But I found it really interesting because, you know, he kind of says like, oh yeah, no, I had a bit of a fight with Polly because I really wanted to ring the bell. Polly's forgiven him by this point anyway. Aslan like makes her say like, yes, we've made up. But yeah, he was a little bit like Uncle Andrew in the middle there, and it wasn't due to magic. So interesting. So the apple tree in like the garden, the locked garden, is probably one of the biggest allegories for the Bible in the entire series. I know we have like Aslan and like Narnia being God's land and Aslan being Jesus and whatever, but I found that particularly the apple and the witch being the snake was like one of the biggest like copy paste change it a little bit. And I think like even to kids, like that's a really obvious plot device that we know from the Bible. So I found that really interesting. My biggest thing about that actually was the witch managed to follow them from where they were to where they camped out in the middle and to the garden all in the same time, despite her running off first. So I don't know how she found them. I don't know how she knew what Aslan's tasks were, what they were going to look at. And she somehow managed to find them, like, even though they were on a flying horse. Like, they were going, like, bird's eye view. She probably had to, like, run. I don't know how fast that would make her be. Like, is she faster than a flying horse? Which, arguably, if it's a flying horse, it's faster than a running horse, because why would you fly if you could have just ran? But I get it's also a kid's book, so I'm overthinking it. But I was just like, how did she follow them and like keep up with them and then also vault over this wall? Like, she's really like a powerful woman if she can run that fast. I don't know. But yeah, then we also have kind of her trying to manipulate Diggory again at the end there, and then going north to her lair that she's gonna build. It wasn't really a great ending. And I say this because whilst the witch does like get her heart's desire, but it's like tainted because she's going to be miserable for eternal life or whatever, nothing really happens to her. She gets to go and like live like thousands of years, which is exactly what she wanted to do, and then she gets to like build her kingdom, which we see in like the next book. So yeah, there's no real repercussions for her apart from like being a bit miserable, which we don't really see because the next time we see her she is the Queen of Narnia. So yeah, I just found that really weird. And then, obviously the actual ending of the book where like Diggs to like heal his mother, that's the actual ending where we get Diggory gets what he wanted all along. He wants his family back. He gets to go live in the countryside again with his family. He's still friends with Polly, who goes to visit every year. And then obviously even Uncle Andrew like goes to live with them. Like, I wouldn't have let Uncle Andrew come live with me if he'd like sent my kids to a different world and like invited this person who threw our aunt like across the room. But whatever, he apparently gets nicer in his old age, even though he occasionally brings up, you know, Jadis and how fine she was. But the whole thing is very good for Diggory and Polly, and I think the kids really get like a good happy ending, which is good. But yeah, I feel like the bad guys, Uncle Andrew and Jadis, both don't really get anything that happens to them, which I find really interesting, because obviously it's a kid's book and normally there's a moral of the story that something happens to them, and it ending on Uncle Andrew talking is also like a little bit of a, oh, okay, maybe we should focus more on Diggory and his mother and his family and Polly, but whatever. But then also I really did like at the end where it fully went into the apple core being planted, the magic rings being planted, and then turned into a wardrobe. Obviously, if you're reading them in the order I read them for the first time, you wouldn't understand what that means. But when you start reading the next book, it kind of leads into it really well. If you're on the other side and you've read Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe first, then it kind of circles back around. And it kind of just keeps everything tied together really well, which I find really helpful, especially for kids' books, because kids need to be told some things. But it's all very magical and nostalgic for me, so that's why I really enjoyed this one, and I'm looking forward to Lion and the Witch and Wardrobe. So I'm hoping, because I'm reading that one next month, it will be a bit better weather. I was kind of hoping it would snow today, because I thought reading Narnia whilst it was snowing would be so cute, because it's such a Christmas movie, or at least the films are for me. They're almost my Christmas movies, but it didn't happen, so it's just been raining all day. But yeah, instead of going on to the Dwarves, which is our next read-along book, I am going to continue reading The Pariah, which is by Anthony Ryan. This is my kind of non-read-along book this month. I'm quite excited to read it. It's quite a thick fantasy book, but I'm about I'm about 130 pages in, and it's really interesting because it's kind of like Robin Hood, but not. And then something else is going on, but I don't know what's going on yet. It's really interesting, so I definitely recommend it. But yeah, read along Narnia with me if you want for the rest of the year. I'll be putting all of the dates up on my blog and on Instagram if you want to read along with me. And yeah, let me know what you think.